My mother-in-law thought she was so clever spiking my wine at Christmas dinner, but she made one fatal mistake. She didn't realize I'd caught her in the act. What do you think happened when I decided to pour that same drugged wine into her precious homemade gravy? Something was seriously wrong with my wine, and my mother-in-law Diane was watching me drink it with the strangest smile on her face. Christmas dinner at the Morrison house in Riverside Heights had started like every other holiday gathering over the past 3 years. Diane bustling around her pristine dining room, moving salt shakers half an inch to the left, straightening already perfect napkins, and making little comments about everything from my shirt choice to the way I'd parked my car. My wife Sarah sat across from me, giving me those apologetic looks she'd perfected since we got married. Her sister Rebecca was scrolling through her phone, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. Their dad Harold had his nose buried so deep in his newspaper that I wondered if he was actually reading or just hiding. But tonight felt different. Tonight, Diane seemed extra pleased about something. The first sip of Merlot hit my tongue wrong. Instead of the smooth, rich taste I expected, there was a sharp, bitter edge that made me want to spit it out. Working in pharmaceutical sales for 8 years had taught me to recognize when something wasn't right with medications, and this wine definitely had that same off-putting chemical taste that meant trouble. "Michael, you look a bit tired," Diane said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Maybe you should take it easy tonight." Her timing was too perfect. Her tone was too sweet. Everything about her body language screamed that she knew exactly why I might be feeling off. I took another small sip, paying close attention this time. The medicinal undertone was unmistakable. Someone had added something to this wine, and given that Diane had personally handed me this specific glass while serving everyone else from a different bottle, the culprit wasn't hard to figure out. My heart started racing, but I kept my face calm. Years of dealing with difficult clients had taught me never to show my hand too early. Instead, I smiled and nodded, pretending everything was normal while my mind raced through the possibilities of what she might have slipped into my drink. "The wine is delicious," I lied smoothly. "What vintage is this?" Diane's eyes lit up with satisfaction. "Oh, it's a special bottle I've been saving for a special occasion. I thought tonight would be perfect to open it." Special occasion. Special bottle. Special treatment for the son-in-law she'd never wanted. Sarah was talking about her new job promotion, completely unaware that her mother was currently trying to drug her husband. Rebecca had moved on to texting someone, probably her boyfriend, who'd wisely chosen to skip tonight's family drama. Harold continued his newspaper performance, though I caught him glancing at his wife over the sports section with an expression I couldn't quite read. The dining room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. Diane had decorated everything in gold and red, with enough twinkling lights to power a small city. Family photos covered every surface, showing decades of Morrison holiday traditions that I would never truly be part of, no matter how many Christmases I attended. "Michael, you really should eat something," Diane insisted, pushing a plate of her famous cheese and crackers toward me. "You look pale." Of course I looked pale. Someone had just poisoned my wine. But I couldn't say that. Not yet. Not without proof. Not without a plan. Instead, I excused myself to use the bathroom, taking my wine glass with me. Once safely behind the locked door, I poured the remaining liquid down the sink and ran water to wash away any evidence. The bitter smell lingered, confirming my suspicions that this wasn't just wine. When I returned to the dining room, Diane was ready with a fresh glass, pouring from an entirely different bottle this time. She handed it to me with that same satisfied smile, like she'd just completed step 1 of some master plan. "Here you go, dear. This one should taste much better." The new wine was perfectly normal. Rich, smooth, exactly what good Merlot should taste like. Which meant the first glass had definitely been tampered with, and Diane was now destroying the evidence by serving the original bottle to everyone else. My phone buzzed with a text message. Sarah had sent me a photo of us from last Christmas with a heart emoji. Looking at that picture, seeing how happy we'd been before I fully understood what I was dealing with in her family, made my chest tight with anger. But anger wouldn't help me here. I needed to be smart about this. I started paying closer attention to everything Diane did. How she lingered near my chair when she thought I wasn't looking. How she kept asking if I felt all right. How she seemed disappointed when I appeared perfectly normal after 20 minutes. Whatever she'd put in that first glass, it was supposed to kick in by now. The fact that I dumped it out instead of drinking it had clearly thrown off her timeline. "Michael, you seem distracted tonight," she said during a pause in conversation. "Everything okay at work?" Another probe. Another attempt to explain away whatever behavior she was expecting from me. "Work's great, actually. Thanks for asking, Diane." I kept my voice steady and cheerful. "This dinner is wonderful." You've really outdone yourself this year. Her smile faltered slightly. This wasn't going according to plan. As we moved into the main course, I realized that Diane had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She'd finally crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and she had no idea that I'd caught her in the act. But she was about to find out exactly what happened when someone tried to drug Michael Morrison. The kitchen became my war room, and Diane's precious gravy was about to become her downfall. While she stepped outside to make what she claimed was an important phone call about tomorrow's bridge game, I moved quickly through her spotless kitchen. Everything was organized with military precision, spice racks alphabetized, measuring cups nested perfectly, dish towels folded into identical squares. This was the domain of someone who controlled every single detail of her environment, including apparently what went into her son-in-law's wine. Finding the original bottle took less than 30 seconds. Diane had left it sitting next to the sink, probably planning to wash it later and destroy any evidence. The rim still showed faint white residue where whatever she'd dissolved hadn't completely mixed with the dark wine. My hands shook slightly as I lifted the bottle, knowing this was proof of something that could destroy our family forever. But Diane had started this game, and I intended to finish it. Rebecca wandered into the kitchen carrying dirty plates from the appetizer course. "Mom's acting weird tonight, even for her," she said quietly, glancing toward the back door where we could see Diane pacing on the patio with her phone. "She's been planning this dinner for weeks like it was some kind of military operation." Her words hit me like a lightning bolt. This wasn't a spontaneous decision to spike my wine. This was planned, calculated, premeditated. "What do you mean, planning it like a military operation?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual while my heart hammered against my ribs. Rebecca shrugged, loading dishes into the dishwasher. She made lists for everything. What food to serve, where everyone should sit, what topics to bring up during dinner. She even wrote down what wine to give each person. She paused, looking at me curiously. "Why? Did something happen?" Before I could answer, Harold shuffled into the kitchen carrying his empty coffee cup. He moved slowly, like a man who'd learned that the safest way through life was to attract as little attention as possible. "Your mother certainly went all out this year," I said to him, watching his reaction carefully. Harold's laugh was bitter. "Diane always goes all out when she wants something. Question is, what does she want this time?" The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about controlling Christmas dinner. This was about something bigger, something that required me to be compromised in front of the whole family. My phone buzzed. Sarah had texted asking if I could help her find something in Mom's bedroom upstairs. Perfect timing. While Rebecca and Harold continued cleaning up, I carefully poured the remaining spiked wine from the bottle into a small measuring cup. The liquid looked innocent enough, just dark red wine with a slightly thicker consistency than normal. But I knew better now. Diane's gravy sat simmering on the stove in her favorite copper pot, the one she'd inherited from her grandmother and treated like a family heirloom. She'd spent 3 hours that afternoon perfecting the recipe, tasting and adjusting until it met her impossibly high standards. This gravy was her pride and joy, the centerpiece of every Morrison family dinner for the past 20 years. Which made it the perfect target. The kitchen was empty. Harold had retreated back to his newspaper fortress in the living room. Rebecca was upstairs helping Sarah look for whatever they were searching for. Diane was still outside, her voice carrying through the window as she complained to her neighbor about something. I stood there for a moment, measuring cup in one hand, ladle in the other, thinking about what I was about to do. Was this crossing a line? Absolutely. Was it justified? After years of boundary violations, manipulation, and now literally trying to drug me? Absolutely. The spiked wine disappeared into the gravy with barely a ripple. I stirred it gently, watching the dark liquid blend seamlessly with Diane's precious family recipe. Whatever she'd given me was now swimming in the dish she'd served to everyone at the table, including herself. "Michael? Everything okay in there?" Diane's voice came from the back door. "Just admiring your kitchen," I called back, quickly rinsing the measuring cup and putting it back where I'd found it. "Sarah asked me to check if you needed help with anything." Diane bustled back inside, her cheeks flushed from the cold December air. She moved immediately to her gravy, lifting the lid to check on it with the intensity of a scientist monitoring a crucial experiment. "Perfect," she murmured, taking a small taste from a clean spoon. She paused, her brow furrowing slightly. Maybe it needs just a touch more salt." I watched her add a pinch of salt and stir it in, completely unaware that she'd just helped distribute her own medicine throughout her masterpiece. "Smells incredible," I said honestly. Whatever she'd added to my wine didn't seem to affect the aroma of her gravy at all. She beamed with pride, the same satisfaction she'd shown when handing me that first glass of wine. Family recipe. I've been perfecting it for decades. Tonight, she'd certainly added something new to that family recipe. Sarah appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath from whatever treasure hunt had taken them upstairs. Mom, do you need help carrying anything to the dining room? Just the gravy boat, Diane said, carefully ladling her creation into the ornate silver serving dish that had been her mother's wedding gift. This is the most important part of the meal. She had no idea how right she was. As we prepared to return to the dining room for the main course, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Whatever happened next would change everything for our family. But Diane had forced this choice when she decided to drug my wine, and now she was going to learn that actions have consequences. The gravy boat sat on the counter, silver gleaming under the kitchen lights, holding its secret ingredient that would soon give Diane a taste of her own medicine. Time to see how she liked being on the receiving end of her own games. 20 minutes after Diane served her famous gravy to everyone at the table, she was starting to look like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Everyone, dinner is served, Diane announced with theatrical flair, carrying her prized gravy boat into the dining room like she was presenting the crown jewels. The ornate silver vessel caught the light from her crystal chandelier, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from smiling at the irony. Sarah clapped her hands together excitedly. Mom, this smells absolutely amazing. You've really outdone yourself this year. Rebecca looked up from her phone long enough to nod in agreement. Yeah, Mom. This whole spread is incredible. Even Harold managed to tear himself away from his newspaper fortress to compliment his wife's cooking efforts. Diane, you've been working on this meal all week. Everything looks perfect. Perfect. If only they knew how perfect this was about to become. Diane beamed with pride as she moved around the table, ladling generous portions of her special gravy over everyone's turkey and mashed potatoes. She lingered especially long at her own plate, giving herself an extra helping because, as she always said, the cook should get to enjoy the fruits of her labor. Michael, make sure you get plenty, she said, hovering over my plate with the ladle. You look like you could use some comfort food tonight. Still trying to explain away whatever effects she thought her wine should be having on me. Still playing her twisted little game, completely unaware that the rules had changed. Thank you, Diane. This looks incredible. I accepted my portion graciously, watching as she moved on to serve herself last, just like she always did. The perfect hostess. The devoted mother. The woman who took such pride in feeding her family. Tonight, she was feeding herself something extra special. The conversation flowed easily around the table as everyone dug into the main course. Sarah talked about her plans for the new year at work. Rebecca shared stories about her latest art classes. Harold actually participated in the discussion for once, probably because his wife seemed too focused on her own plate to control every word that came out of his mouth. And Diane? Diane was eating her gravy like it was the last meal she'd ever have. This turned out even better than last year, she said between bites, her eyes practically glowing with satisfaction. I think I finally got the seasoning just right. She certainly had added something new to the seasoning. I found myself studying her face for any signs of change. Pharmaceutical sales had taught me the timeline for most common medications, but I wasn't sure exactly what she'd used on me or how long it would take to affect her. All I could do was wait and watch. Mom, you're eating that gravy like it's going out of style, Rebecca laughed, pointing at Diane's plate with her fork. Save some room for dessert. I'm just so pleased with how it turned out, Diane replied, taking another generous bite. Sometimes you work so hard on something, and when it comes together perfectly, you just want to savor every moment. Sarah raised her wine glass in a toast. To Mom's amazing cooking and all the love she puts into every meal. We all clinked glasses while I watched Diane's face carefully. Was that a slight flush in her cheeks? Or just the warmth from the kitchen and all her running around? Michael, you're being awfully quiet tonight, Diane observed, her sharp eyes focusing on me with laser precision. How's your dinner? Absolutely delicious, I replied honestly. Everything tastes perfect. Especially the gravy. Something flickered across her expression. Pride mixed with something else. Something that looked almost like suspicion. Good, she said slowly, taking another bite. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. The dining room felt charged with unspoken tension. Sarah was completely oblivious, chatting happily about Christmas shopping plans for next year. Rebecca had returned to her phone, probably texting her boyfriend about how long this family dinner was taking. Harold continued methodically working through his plate, years of practice having taught him to eat efficiently during the brief windows when his wife wasn't trying to manage every aspect of his existence. But Diane was different now. Her movements were becoming slightly slower. Her normally perfect posture was starting to relax in a way that seemed involuntary rather than intentional. "Are you feeling all right, Mom?" Sarah asked suddenly, noticing what I'd been watching for the past 10 minutes. "You look a little flushed." Diane's hand went to her cheek reflexively. "I'm fine, dear. Just warm from all the cooking. You know how hot the kitchen gets during the holidays." Her words were still clear, but there was a slight softness to them that hadn't been there an hour ago. Like someone who'd had just one glass of wine too many, except I knew she'd barely touched her alcohol tonight. She'd been too busy making sure I drank mine. "Maybe you should sit down and relax," Harold suggested, speaking up with more concern than I'd heard from him all evening. "You've been on your feet all day preparing this meal." "Nonsense," Diane waved him off, though the gesture was less crisp than usual. "I'm perfectly fine. Just enjoying watching everyone appreciate all my hard work." She took another large spoonful of gravy, and I had to work hard to keep my expression neutral. Every bite was bringing her closer to understanding exactly what I'd discovered about her special wine selection. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 8 o'clock, its deep notes echoing through the house. Diane startled slightly at the sound, which was odd because that clock had been chiming every hour for the past 20 years. "Goodness, where has the evening gone?" she said, blinking slowly like she was having trouble focusing. "It feels like we just sat down." Sarah and Rebecca exchanged glances across the table. Even Harold looked up from his plate with growing concern. Something was definitely wrong with Diane Morrison, and she was just beginning to realize it herself. Diane's fork clattered against her plate, and suddenly everyone at the Morrison family table was staring at the woman who never, ever lost control of anything. "Mom?" Sarah's voice carried a note of alarm that cut through the comfortable dinner conversation like a knife. "Are you sure you're feeling okay?" Diane blinked several times, her usually sharp eyes looking glassy and unfocused. The woman who had spent the entire evening orchestrating every detail of our Christmas dinner was now gripping the edge of the table like she needed it to stay upright. "I'm perfectly fine," she insisted, but her words came out slower than normal, each syllable requiring visible effort. "Just a bit tired from all the cooking." Rebecca set down her phone for the first time all evening, giving her mother her full attention. "You look really pale, Mom. Maybe you should lie down." "Don't be ridiculous," Diane snapped, though even her trademark sharp tone sounded muffled. "I don't get sick. I never get sick." Harold folded his newspaper completely, something I'd never seen him do during a family dinner. "Diane, you're swaying in your chair. Something's not right." That's when I decided to start documenting everything. Quietly, I pulled out my phone and began recording a voice memo, holding it low under the table where no one could see. Whatever was about to happen, I wanted evidence of it. "Time is 8:15 p.m. Christmas evening," I whispered into the phone. "Diane Morrison appears to be experiencing symptoms consistent with sedation. She's consumed approximately 3 large servings of gravy over the past 30 minutes. Who are you talking to?" Diane's head swiveled toward me with the slow, exaggerated movement of someone fighting against their own reflexes. "Just checking a message from work," I lied smoothly, sliding the phone back into my pocket. "You know how it is during the holidays." She stared at me for a long moment, her usually calculating expression replaced by something confused and slightly suspicious. Like she was trying to solve a puzzle but couldn't quite remember what the pieces were supposed to look like. Sarah stood up and moved around the table to her mother's side. "Mom, let me help you to the living room. You can rest on the couch while we clean up dinner." "I don't need help," Diane protested, but when she tried to stand, her legs wobbled visibly. She grabbed Sarah's arm to steady herself, and I could see the exact moment when fear replaced confusion in her eyes. Rebecca was now recording everything with her phone, though she was trying to be subtle about it. "Should we call someone? Like a doctor or something?" "No doctors," Diane said quickly, though her voice lacked its usual authority. "I just need to sit down for a minute." Harold appeared at his wife's other side, and together he and Sarah guided Diane to the living room couch. I followed, along with Rebecca, all of us moving like a family dealing with a medical emergency. Because that's exactly what this was, even if none of them understood the real cause yet. "Has Mom been taking any new medications?" Sarah asked Harold quietly while Diane settled onto the couch with her eyes closed. "Not that I know of," Harold replied, but there was something in his tone that made me think he was holding back information. "Though your mother doesn't always tell me about these things." Diane's eyes snapped open at that comment. "I tell you everything important, Harold." "Do you?" he asked, and for the first time since I'd known him, Harold Morrison looked directly at his wife with something that might have been challenge in his expression. The room fell silent except for the ticking of that grandfather clock and Diane's slightly labored breathing. "I think we should talk about what's really going on here," I said carefully, pulling out my phone again. This time I didn't try to hide it. Diane, about an hour ago, you gave me a glass of wine that tasted very different from what everyone else was drinking. Sarah's head snapped up. What do you mean, different? I mean it had a medicinal taste. Bitter. Like something had been dissolved in it. I kept my voice calm and factual. When I went to the bathroom, I poured it out and tested what was left in the bottle. There was white residue around the rim. Rebecca's eyes went wide. Are you saying Mom put something in your wine? I'm saying someone did. And given that Diane specifically handed me that glass while serving everyone else from a different bottle, the evidence points in a pretty clear direction. Diane tried to sit up straighter, but the movement seemed to require enormous effort. That's ridiculous. Why would I do such a thing? That's exactly what I'd like to know, I replied, my voice still calm despite my racing heart. But first, I think you should know that whatever you put in my wine ended up somewhere else entirely. The color drained from Diane's face so quickly I thought she might pass out. What do you mean? Sarah demanded, looking back and forth between her mother and me like she was watching a tennis match. I mean that when I discovered my wine had been tampered with, I took the remaining liquid and added it to something else. Something that Diane consumed quite enthusiastically during dinner. Harold's mouth fell open. Rebecca's phone nearly slipped from her hands. And Diane? Diane looked at her empty gravy-stained plate with the expression of someone who had just realized they'd walked into a trap of their own making. You didn't, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I did exactly what you did to me, I replied. The only difference is that you chose to drug someone without their knowledge, while I simply returned your own medicine to you through your favorite dish. The room erupted in shocked voices and accusations, but all I could focus on was Diane's face as the full realization of what had happened finally sank in. She had tried to drug her son-in-law at Christmas dinner, and now she was experiencing the effects of her own weapon. Sarah's scream shattered the silence in the Morrison living room, and suddenly Christmas dinner became a full-scale family war zone. What do you mean you drugged each other? Sarah's voice cracked with disbelief as she stared at her mother slumped on the couch and her husband standing calmly beside the coffee table. This is insane. Both of you have lost your minds. Rebecca dropped her phone completely this time, the device hitting the hardwood floor with a sharp crack. Holy shit, Mom. Did you really try to drug Michael? Language, Rebecca, Diane mumbled automatically, even in her compromised state, still trying to control everything around her. Harold stood up from his chair so fast that his newspaper scattered across the floor like autumn leaves. For the first time in probably 20 years, he looked directly at his wife with something that wasn't fear or resignation. Diane Elizabeth Morrison, his voice was quiet but carried more authority than I'd ever heard from him. Did you put something in Michael's wine? The room held its breath waiting for her answer. Even the grandfather clock seemed to pause its eternal ticking. Diane's glassy eyes darted around the room, landing on each family member before finally settling on me. The calculation was still there, even through whatever medication she'd chosen for my evening entertainment. He's lying, she said, but her words slurred together in a way that made her sound like a child caught with chocolate on her face. Michael is trying to turn you all against me. With what? I asked, pulling out my phone again. Diane, I have recordings of everything that happened tonight. Your own family watched you serve me wine from a different bottle than everyone else. They saw you ask repeatedly if I felt okay. They witnessed you eating your own gravy enthusiastically. Sarah sank into the armchair across from her mother, her face pale with shock. Mom, why would you do something like this? Because he doesn't deserve you. The words exploded from Diane with more force than she'd managed since the medication kicked in. He's not good enough for our family. He never was. Rebecca picked up her cracked phone and started recording again. Mom, you need to hear yourself right now. I've been trying to protect this family for 3 years, Diane continued, her voice getting stronger as anger overrode whatever she'd taken. Michael has been slowly poisoning you against me, Sarah. Making you think I'm controlling and manipulative. You are controlling and manipulative, Harold said, and every head in the room turned toward him in shock. The man who had hidden behind newspapers and silence for decades was finally speaking his truth. You control what I eat, what I watch, what I wear, who I talk to. Harold's voice gathered strength with each word. You've been doing it to me for 30 years, and now you're doing it to Michael too. Sarah looked between her parents like she was seeing them both for the first time. Dad? Is this true? Harold's laugh was bitter and tired. Your mother made lists, Sarah. Lists of what Michael should drink, where he should sit, what topics would be discussed at dinner. She's been planning this evening for weeks. My heart was racing, but I kept my voice steady. Harold, do you know what she put in my wine? He nodded slowly, looking older than his 65 years. Ambien. She's been saving it up from her own prescription for months. Said she wanted Michael to be relaxed and agreeable for Christmas dinner. Relaxed and agreeable for what? Rebecca demanded. Diane tried to stand up but only managed to prop herself up on her elbows. I wanted him to embarrass himself. To prove to Sarah that he's not stable enough to be her husband. The admission hung in the air like poison gas. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. You wanted to destroy my marriage. I wanted to save it, Diane insisted. Save you from making the biggest mistake of your life. The biggest mistake of my life was not believing my husband when he tried to tell me what you were really like, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. I pulled up the voice memos on my phone. I've been documenting things for months, Sarah. Not because I wanted to hurt your family, but because I needed evidence of what was happening. What kind of evidence? Rebecca asked. Text messages where your mother told people Sarah was having problems at work when she got promoted. Photos of birthday cards she threw away before Sarah could see them. Recordings of phone calls where she told your aunts that I was controlling Sarah's finances. Harold's shoulders sagged with the weight of recognition. She's been doing this kind of thing for years. To everyone who got close to any of us. That's enough, Diane said, struggling to sit up fully. I won't listen to this anymore. Actually, you will, I said firmly. Because for the first time tonight, you don't get to control what happens next. Sarah wiped her eyes and looked directly at her mother. What else, Michael? What else has she done that I don't know about? I took a deep breath, knowing that what I was about to say would change their family forever. Last month, when you couldn't find your birth control pills, your mother threw them away and told me she did it to help you focus on what really matters. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stood up slowly, her whole body trembling with rage and betrayal. Get out, she whispered. Sarah, honey, let me explain, Diane started. Get out of my life. Sarah screamed, and the sound echoed through the house like a breaking heart. 6 months later, I was setting our own Christmas table when Sarah found the letter that would change everything one final time. Michael, you need to see this, Sarah called from the kitchen, holding a cream-colored envelope with Diane's perfect handwriting across the front. Our new apartment in downtown Riverside Heights felt like a sanctuary compared to the battlefield her childhood home had become. We'd moved out 2 weeks after Christmas dinner, and every day since had been a journey toward building something healthy together. Another apology letter? I asked, joining her near the window where afternoon light streamed through our simple white curtains. Different this time, Sarah said, tearing open the envelope carefully. This one's addressed to both of us. The letter was written on Diane's expensive stationery, the kind she used for important occasions. But the handwriting was shaky, uncertain, nothing like the confident script that had terrorized greeting cards and grocery lists for decades. Dear Sarah and Michael, Sarah read aloud, her voice steady but cautious. I have been attending therapy for 5 months now, as ordered by the court after the incident on Christmas night. The court order had been Harold's idea, surprisingly. After 30 years of silence, he'd found his voice and used it to protect his daughter's marriage in a way that shocked everyone, including himself. My therapist has helped me understand that my behavior toward both of you was not protective but destructive. I was not saving Sarah from a bad marriage. I was trying to prevent her from having any marriage that I could not control. I watched Sarah's face as she continued reading. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something that looked like relief. Like finally getting an explanation for a lifetime of confusing interactions. I realize now that drugging Michael's wine was not an isolated incident of poor judgment. It was the culmination of years of boundary violations, manipulation, and abuse. Sarah paused, looking up at me. She's never used that word before. Which word? Abuse. She's never admitted that what she did was actually abuse. The letter continued for 3 more pages, detailing specific incidents that Diane was working through in therapy. Things Sarah had forgotten or dismissed. Things that made so much more sense now with the clarity of distance and professional guidance. The hardest part to accept, Sarah read, is that I taught Sarah to doubt her own perceptions and instincts. When Michael tried to tell her about my behavior, I had already trained her to dismiss those concerns as overreaction or paranoia. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. She'd been sending regular updates about her parents' relationship since Christmas. Harold had filed for legal separation in February and was living in his own apartment for the first time since college. He seemed genuinely happy for the first time in decades. What does Rebecca say? Sarah asked, noticing my phone. Dad signed the final divorce papers yesterday. He's officially free. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen when discussing her family in months. Good for him. What about the rest of the letter? She continued reading Diane's careful words about therapy assignments, medication adjustments, and supervised visits with a family counselor if Sarah ever chose to attempt rebuilding their relationship. I don't expect forgiveness, the letter concluded. I don't deserve it. But I want you both to know that I finally understand the difference between love and control. I spent so many years thinking they were the same thing. Sarah folded the letter carefully and set it on our kitchen counter next to a photo from our anniversary dinner last week. We looked genuinely happy in that picture, relaxed in a way that wouldn't have been possible a year ago. What do you think? She asked. I think your mother has a long way to go, but this is the first time she's taken responsibility without making excuses or blaming someone else. Sarah nodded, staring out the window at the Christmas lights beginning to twinkle in our neighbor's yard. Do you think people can really change? I think some people can if they want it badly enough and get the right help. I wrapped my arms around her from behind, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. But I also think we get to decide what level of relationship we're comfortable with, if any. I'm not ready, she said quietly. Maybe not ever. That's okay. You don't owe anyone a relationship, even family. We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood prepare for another Christmas. This year would be different. This year we were hosting Rebecca and Harold at our place, creating new traditions that didn't involve walking on eggshells or wondering if someone had tampered with the food. You know what's funny? Sarah said, turning in my arms to face me. What's that? She was so worried about you not being good enough for me. But you're the one who taught me what healthy boundaries look like. You're the one who showed me that love doesn't have to hurt. I kissed her forehead gently. We taught each other. That's how partnerships are supposed to work. Later that evening, as Sarah put Diane's letter in a box with other important documents, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's simply refusing to let someone else's poison become part of your own recipe for happiness. Diane had tried to drug me into submission, but instead she'd accidentally drugged herself into finally facing the truth about who she'd become. And sometimes that's exactly the medicine everyone needs to start healing.